Good morning, grade 9 students. Today, we are going to talk about the arts during the Baroque period. So the term Baroque was derived from the Portuguese word barroco, which means irregularly shaped pearl or stone. So this describes a fairly complex idiom and focuses on painting, sculpture, as well as architecture. So after the idealism of Renaissance and the slightly forced nature of mannerism, Baroque art above all reflects the tensions of the age, notably the desire of the Roman Catholic Church in Rome to reassert itself in the wake of the Protestant Reformation, which is almost the same with Catholic Reformation art of the period. Although always in conflict with the simple, clear, and geometric concepts of Classicism, the Baroque existed in varying degrees of intensity, from a simple animated movement of lines and surfaces to a rich and dynamic wealth. So the Baroque was a period of artistic style in exaggerated motion, drama, tension, and grandeur. So the style started in Rome, Italy, and it spread to most of Europe. So the Roman Catholic Church highly encouraged the Baroque style to propagate Christianity, while the aristocracy used Baroque style for architecture and arts to impress visitors, express triumphs, power, and control. For the Baroque painting, they illustrated key elements of Catholic dogma. It can either be directly in biblical works or indirectly in imaginary or symbolic work. So the gestures are less ambiguous, less arcane, and mysterious. For the Baroque sculpture, it is typically larger than life size. So it is marked by a similar sense of dynamic movement along with an active use of space. For the Baroque architecture, this was designed to create a spectacle and illusion. So the straight lines of the Renaissance were replaced with flowing curves. So we have here your famous artists together with their famous artworks. For the first artist, you have here Michelangelo Merisi or Amerigo da Caravaggio. So he was better known as Caravaggio. So he was an Italian artist who wanted to deviate from the classical masters of the Renaissance. So he was an outcast in his society. Why? It is because of his own actions and the lack of modesty and reverence for religious subjects in his own paintings. So Mr. Caravaggio started out as a specialist in his paintings of still life, especially of fruits. So studies of single figures followed, but they are clumsier than the fruit, which gives their savor of originality and charm. So Caravaggio's models at this period were either himself or young persons who have an air of being promising but wicked. In the artwork of Mr. Caravaggio, he portrayed dramatic movement, tenebrism, emotionally charged subjects, and figures caught in time. And when we say tenebrism, we are referring to the exaggerated chiaroscuro. So it is a dark matter. So for the tenebrism, it is often characterized by a small and concentrated light source in the painting, or this one appears to be an external spotlight directed as a very specific point in the composition. So here are some examples of his famous artworks. You have here the Supper at Emmaus, the Conversion of Saint Paul, and the Entombment of Christ. Aside from Caravaggio, we also have here Gian Lorenzo Bernini. So Bernini was an Italian artist and the first Baroque artist. So he practiced architecture, sculpture, painting, stage design, and was also a playwright. So he was also the last in the list of the dazzling universal geniuses. As a prodigy, his first artwork date from his Earth birthday. So some example of his early works were the goat Almathea with the infant Jupiter and the faun, Damned Soul and the Blessed Soul. So those are the two early artworks that he made. So he even made a sculpture of David. So the David was for Cardinal Borghese, which is strikingly different from Michelangelo's David because it shows the difference between Renaissance and the Baroque period. So Mr. Bernini was the greatest Baroque sculptor and architect as seen in his designs of the Piazza San Pietro in front of the Basilica. So for the Piazza San Pietro, it is one of his most innovative and successful architectural designs. So for the famous Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, that was his greatest achievement, and the colonnade of the Piazza of St. Peter's, Rome. So for his famous artworks, you have there the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa and the colonnade of the Piazza of St. Peter's, Rome. We also have here Peter Paul Rubens. So Rubens was a Flemish Baroque painter. So he was well known for his paintings of mythical and figurative subjects, landscapes, portraits, and counter-Reformation altarpieces. His commissioned works were mostly religious subjects, history paintings of magical creatures, and hunt scenes. So some of his famous artworks are, you have there the Samson and Delilah, Landscape with the Tower, and the Portrait of Helena Forment. We also have here Rembrandt van Rijn. So Mr. Rembrandt was a brilliant Dutch realist, painter, and etcher. So he is generally considered as one of the greatest painters and printmakers in European art. He followed no particular faith, but was interested in spiritual values and often chooses religious subjects. So Mr. Rembrandt shares with Rubens the revolution whereby painting came to depict the more personal aspects of the painter. So this includes his own home and his family. So no artist has painted himself as often as did Rembrandt. So his concept of himself continued to deepen in grasp and subtlety while his technique grew more daring. So his well-known work was his self-portrait in the old age. Rembrandt had produced over 600 paintings, nearly 400 etchings, and 2,000 drawings. And we also have Mr. Diego Velázquez. So Mr. Velázquez of Spain developed out the Baroque. So he was one of the finest masters of composition and one of the most important painters of the Spanish Golden Age. So he worked out solutions to pictorial problems of design that transcend the style of any period. So Mr. Velázquez was the case of a painter who discovered his avocation almost at the very start of his career. So the passion for still life frequently emerges in Velázquez arts. So some of his famous artworks were the Surrender of Breda, Las Meninas, Los Baracos, and you have there the portrait of Maria Teresa. So those are the famous artists together with their famous artworks during the Baroque era. So thank you very much, grade 9, for listening and for viewing this video. Thank you very much and see you next week.